All right. I've got an email that you may be interested in here from our friend Mark Cole. Mark Cole writes every once in a while asking a very intelligent question, and he gets shot down a lot of times for Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. But I got this one because I want you to help me out with this. Jim and Brian, this topic came up recently. He doesn't say where. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of high-level football players become pro wrestlers and probably dozens of basketball players. But why have there been so few baseball players? You got Randy Savage and Jeff Torborg as probably the best-known American wrestlers with a minor league baseball background. And boy, when you have to go from Randy Savage to Jeff Torborg, that's an immense drop. Go ahead.
Jeff Torborg was an actual baseball player, a pretty good catcher, caught Sandy Koufax, became a manager.
He caught Sandy Koufax. I didn't even know Sandy got away.
Well, he was his catcher. He was a horrible manager for the Mets, but also had some managerial success.
Who, Jeff Torborg?
Jeff Torborg. Dale Torborg was his son.
I didn't know that he managed the, or Jeff Tor. So who's the Torborg now?
Dale Torborg was the Kiss Demon.
Oh, so Mark got his name wrong. So was Mark Torborg a baseball player?
No, Jeff Torborg was the baseball player. Dale Torborg was Jeff's son.
So Mark
is not a Torborg.
Question. He's not a Torborg. Remember Torberg?
That's a great name. The best name.
LPWA, but we're not talking about him. But that was a cool name, Torberg. And I don't know what, I think he might have been Norwegian.
There's Tor Johnson. There's
from Norwegian. Okay, well now, so Jeff Torborg is not the Kiss Demon. That's Dale Torborg.
Correct.
Jeff Torborg was the baseball player.
And manager, yes.
And manager. Dale Torborg, did he play any baseball?
He may have. Actually, I would assume he probably did at some point, but I'm not. He didn't get to the major leagues, if that's your question.
Okay, well, he said minor league here. So Mark's question is not complete shit, but you've interrupted it and derailed the whole thing, so I'll start again. You got Randy Savage and whichever Torborg as the best-known American wrestlers with a minor league baseball background. And again, I stand by my statement that that's a significant drop from number 1 to number 2. Dusty Rhodes had some ball playing in his past. He was a pretty good, and Dusty got his nickname from a previous baseball player named Rhodes that was nicknamed Dusty.
Dusty Rhodes for the New York Giants.
Dusty Rhodes. Well, yes, of course, a previous player named Rhodes whose nickname was Dusty would be Dusty Rhodes, wouldn't it now? Giant Baba played briefly for the Tokyo Yomiuri Giants. And the WWE's Veer had a major motion picture made about his winning a pitching contest in India. Okay, that may be a reach as well. I mean, I guess it was a major motion picture in India. But anyway, so Mark continues, finally. After that, names are harder to come by. I'm sure Brian, as a big baseball fan, probably has his own thoughts on this topic. Do the skills a baseball player has not translate to wrestling the same as a football player or amateur wrestler or even basketball player? And you give your thoughts, Mr. Last, on that.
In terms of what we see, if you watch baseball, there aren't too many players that could do promos, that have shown that ability. We see post-game interviews on the field, and usually it's nice, and you may get a little bit of information, but no one's firing up the crowd and saying, hey, are you people here? You know, no one's doing anything like that, so it's hard to look at it from that perspective. You know, baseball players typically are not as big as football players, or even basketball players. Basketball players may have the height. Football players, of course, have the size that's closest to traditionally what a wrestler would be, which is why so many of them were natural fits for wrestling. But if you're a pitcher, you're probably pretty slim. If you're a middle infielder, you may be under 6 feet tall. You know, some of the outfielders, especially some of the people we see now that are in great shape, they could be, you know, they're as big as some of the guys you see on AEW TV, but that's not saying very much.
What about who was the home run fellow that was having the fight with the other guy over the home run? Mark McGwire. He was sauced to the gills, right?
Oh, he was everyone was juiced up. That was the time of steroids in baseball. And you're not supposed to say this because how dare they use steroids in baseball? But it was a fun time. And it was, for a few seasons there, it was great. There was so much happening and everyone loved it. But we're not supposed to say that.
Well, and also I think you hit what I was going to say. The main thing, obviously, or not even the main thing, but the obvious thing is baseball players are not normally physically that big. They have to run. They have to be more agile and have cardio and things like that. For another thing, and like you said, there is some, exception to that rule with the steroid era or whatever with Mark McGwire and those other guys. But that's less important today, as you mentioned, because wrestlers are smaller. Their job requirement is not to be physically intimidating anymore, unfortunately. But also, it's not a contact sport. Baseball is not an aggressive sport, not a high-level energy sport. It's a sport of technique and science and, the game, whatever the fuck. It's like, I don't know that I'm not saying they're not great athletes, but you don't have to. There's no part of baseball where not only is it not a contact sport, but you have to be on for a significant period of time. It's hit, run the bases, stop, right? So maybe that training, that expertise, the technique. With basketball, you're playing and it's physical, even though it's not supposed to be. With football, it's physical and it's supposed to be, and it's more of a contact sport and it's more aggressive and it's more for over-the-top fucking personalities, like you said, both verbally and physically than like Carlin said, football and baseball. And baseball's a pastoral game. The object is to go home. And football is a warlike game.
A few things I'll say. I think if you're a wrestling fan, it helps with baseball. Because I think baseball is actually the best sport in terms of having storylines. Like game-long storylines, season-long storylines, quiet moments where the commentators are telling you what's going on. Then the moments where everyone starts yelling. It's kind of the way wrestling used to be. And baseball's the best for that. But the other thing we're not discussing is, let's look at the Mets, because they're the best.
Okay.
If you look at, let's say, the top two pitchers and the top paid two regular position players, Max Scherzer is the top pitcher in terms of salary. He's making $43 million this year.
Jesus Christ.
Jacob deGrom, who's going to opt out of his contract to get a raise next year, who's the best pitcher in baseball, is making $33.5 million this year. Our shortstop, Francisco Lindor.
Ours? Are you a stockholder now?
The Mets and me are like one and the same. Francisco Lindor, $32 million, and Starling Marte, who's in fantastic physical condition, he could be a wrestler, is making $14.5 million. So if you're a baseball player that loves wrestling, you can't do shit during your career. You're going to give up that money for one night and get hurt? If a pitcher hurts his arm, anyone hurts their arm or knee, it would have to happen after their career. And if you're making that much money, you got to really be a wrestling fan to want to go do that.
To get beat up. And that's, the fact of the matter is that the crossover between the NFL, except, with players that tried and got injured, didn't make the cut or whatever, and needed a fallback, the crossover from the NFL from the 60s and 70s to now is nil. Because then wrestling was getting the Ernie Ladds, the Wahoo McDaniels, the guys that were good, accomplished, notorious pro football players, but they could make more money back then in wrestling. But now that is obviously not the case, even with the WWE, with the salaries in pro sports. And to throw a fucking ball, $43 million a year.
Hey, how much is he generating? It shouldn't be how much is he making as compared to the average person. How much is he making compared to what he adds to that team, and how much is that team worth, and how much money are they making?
Okay, so what is that equation there?
I don't have all the numbers.
Oh,
but
I don't have all the information.
It's quite profitable to own a Major League Baseball team, let alone in the biggest city in the country. So I'm sure the Mets are doing just fine, and there's a reason they signed him.
Well, if he's not selling a lot of T-shirts for that kind of money, I'd let him go.
They just had a big T-shirt giveaway last Friday for him.
They're giving them away. Boy, they're just charitable. $43 million for this guy to throw a ball, free T-shirts for everybody. They're just charitable, aren't they?
You'd like this guy. He's an animal on the mound.
Well, why would that endear him to me? An animal on a mound.
Well, not a physical animal, a literal animal, but a metaphorical animal I'm speaking about. But
well, what's
he's got great energy.
Animalistic about? I might like him if he's not trying to take my goddamn dinner away from me. What's he, some rabid Wolverine going to steal my cheeseburger?
He kind of looks like it. He has different colored eyes.
Then who?
Than everyone. I mean, one eye is brown, one eye is blue.
I thought you meant he had different colored eyes than anybody else, but each of his eyes is a different color. Would you like to talk about a horse of a different color?
I was wondering where the transition was.
Well,
yes.